MACHAON'S story, Part 3, Telephus and the Greeks. By nightfall, the Greeks retreated to their ships, chastened and full of regret. What had begun that morning as a glorious campaign had turned into a tragic mistake. Yet amidst the embarrassment, a silver lining emerged. King Telephus, though grievously wounded by Achilles' spear, sent word that he harbored no lasting grudge against the Greeks. After all, their physician had tended to Mysian wounded and even saved his son's life. In return, Telephus would not oppose or harry the Greeks' departure from Mysian lands. Agamemnon, too proud to offer an explicit apology, accepted this ceasefire and safe passage with terse gratitude. At dawn, the Greek fleet set sail from Mysia, carrying their own injured aboard and leaving behind fields where Greek and Mysian blood now mingled in the soil. On MACHAON'S ship, the mood was somber as the shoreline receded. He spent the day moving among the wounded, laid out on deck, checking dressings, cleansing wounds again with fresh water and wine, and murmuring words of encouragement. A young hoplite whose mangled arm MACHAON had saved from amputation in Mysia gripped the healer's hand with tears in his eyes. "My life is yours now, sir. I'll follow you through anything," the soldier said fervently. MACHAON offered a gentle smile and shook his head. "Follow life, not me," he replied softly. "Live on, and make sure your family sees you home again once this war is over." In another corner of the ship, Podalirius sat with his back against a coil of rope, spooning a bitter brew of willow bark tea into the mouth of a feverish spearman. All around, the men spoke in low tones of the day's events. Whispers circulated about the surgeon prince who had charged into the fray not with sword but with salves, not to kill but to save. Many of the warriors were awestruck by MACHAON'S fearless actions, tending enemy and comrade alike in the midst of battle. To them, this mercy and bravery was a wonder beyond any feat of arms that day. Even Achilles was heard to remark later, with uncharacteristic admiration, "While we fought for glory, Machon fought his own battle against death and won more victories than any of us." The sting of misidentifying Mysia for Troy would fade in time, but the legend of how the sons of Asclepius brought healing to a stricken battlefield took root among the Greeks as a tale of unexpected nobility. Quietly, as the salt breeze carried the ship onward, MACHAON reflected on the day's upheaval and what it portended. In a single afternoon, he had tasted war's most bewildering tangle, the line between ally and enemy blurring under a healer's impartial gaze. He had made a personal enemy of death itself, not of King Telephus or any mortal foe. And in doing so, he had earned the respect of heroes like Achilles and Odysseus, and even, indirectly, the gratitude of a foreign king whose wrath could have been fearsome. Yet he also sensed a darker thread weaving into the tapestry of fate. The boy Eurypylus, saved this day, was bound by blood to Telephus and by destiny to the greater war. MACHAON could not have foreseen it, but his merciful deed on the fields of Mysia would one day return to test him in the war's final act. For now, as the fleet sailed on into the open sea, he allowed himself a moment of weary pride. He had faced his first battle and remained true to himself and his oath. The warrior healer had proven that even amid the madness of bloodshed, the light of compassion could prevail. With that thought steadying his soul, MACHAON turned his gaze forward to the east, where Troy and the long war ahead awaited. The Greek armada limped to a halt after the Mysian debacle, forced to regroup and seek guidance. Word soon reached the Greeks that King Telephus's wound, the one dealt by Achilles, refused to heal. Despite all attempts by Telephus's own physicians, the gash in his thigh festered and burned, growing worse by the day. Infection set in, and Telephus was said to be feverish and weakening. An oracle was consulted, and its pronouncement baffled everyone. "He who wounded Telephus shall heal him." This cryptic decree spread like wildfire through the Greek camp. What could it mean? Achilles himself was at a loss. He was peerless in war, yes, but the art of healing lay mostly beyond his ken. Some whispered that unless Telephus was cured, the Greek fleet would never find its way to Troy. It was as if the gods had entangled Telephus's fate with theirs until amends were made. Odysseus, ever pragmatic, realized that solving this riddle could not only lift whatever curse hung over their voyage, but also turn a foe into an ally and get the campaign back on track. And so, envoys were dispatched and a peculiar diplomatic meeting arranged. The Greeks would make amends by helping cure Telephus. In return, the king of Mysia would guide them to Troy. Indeed, one reason they had gone astray was a lack of reliable pilots in those foreign waters. Machaon found himself at the center of this mission. It both surprised and honored him that Agamemnon insisted he come, not as a mere attendant, but as a respected healer whose insight might crack the divine riddle. Thus Machaon traveled with Achilles and Odysseus to the court of King Telephus at Pergamon. Entering Telephus's hall, Machaon noted frescoes depicting the labors of Heracles on the walls, a proud display of Telephus's heroic lineage. The king himself lay on a raised couch, pale and feverish, his wounded leg propped on cushions and wrapped in bandages that gave off a sour medicinal odor. Despite the obvious pain etched on his face, Telephus greeted the Greek visitors with dignified restraint. Achilles stood by, shifting awkwardly. It's not every day a warrior must face the man he nearly killed and then attempt to save him. Machaon stepped forward and bowed respectfully, feeling all eyes on him. Agamemnon's expectant, Odysseus' calculating, Achilles' hopeful, Telephus' skeptical but desperate. First, Machaon examined the wound with gentle hands. A foul odor wafted up as he peeled back the dressings. Telephus gritted his teeth but did not cry out. Clearly the man was as stoic as any patient Machaon had treated. The wound was inflamed, edges blackened with creeping infection. Red streaks ran up the king's thigh, a dangerous sign that the corruption was spreading. Machaon's brow furrowed. This was no ordinary festering. It was as if some malign force kept the injury open, defying nature's drive to heal. To modern understanding, the wound was septic, teeming with bacteria, but to the people of that time it appeared as a curse. Telephus himself rasped, "They say only the hand that struck me can cure me." He locked eyes with Achilles. The young Greek hero looked stricken with guilt. "I would do it gladly, Telephus, but I have no idea how," Achilles admitted. "If my spear caused this, perhaps I should surrender the same spear to your heart and end the pain." It was a grim jest born of frustration, and Machaon quickly interceded. "No one is dying today by anyone's spear," he said firmly. A spark kindled in his mind. The same spear. The oracle's phrasing repeated in his head, "He who wounded shall heal." It might not mean Achilles' hands. Perhaps it was something of Achilles' essence, perhaps the weapon itself. Machaon had long known that certain metals had uncanny effects on wounds. Copper in particular, a chief component of bronze weapons, was sometimes used in treating sores. His father had occasionally scraped verdigris, the green rust of bronze, into stubborn infections. They believed it had sympathetic magic for the wound, but in truth, as we now know, copper salts can kill the hidden demons of infection. Machaon considered Achilles' spear, forged of ash wood and bronze, a gift from Chiron the centaur himself. Perhaps in a twist of divine wit, the spear that struck Telephus carried within it the cure. He voiced this idea tentatively. The oracle may speak in riddles. "He who wounded shall heal" might imply that something from Achilles, or his weapon, is needed to close this wound. The assembly murmured. Odysseus's eyes lit up. He had come to a similar conclusion and was pleased the healer reached it as well. "Worth a try," Achilles agreed, already unslinging his great spear from his shoulder. The spear's bronze head was still stained with dried Mysian blood. Telephus, feverish, managed a weak laugh. "If you propose to stab me again to cure me, "I'll politely decline," he joked through his pain. "Nothing so drastic," Machaon reassured him with a smile. "But with your leave, King, I will take a small scraping from this spear and apply it to your wound. The bronze that harmed you may also carry healing grace." It sounded like sympathetic magic, and indeed it was, though Machaon also trusted a practical logic beneath the mysticism. Telephus consented with a weary nod. In careful strokes, Machaon used a file to shave off fine green filings of aged bronze from Achilles' spearhead. The verdigris powder collected in a small dish. He mixed it with a bit of wine and honey to form a paste, adding honey to make it stick, and because honey itself helped purify wounds, its natural antibacterial properties were another boon of nature that ancient healers knew in practice, if not theory. Achilles himself helped, holding the bowl steady with hands more used to dealing death than preparing medicine. Once ready, Machaon cleaned Telephus's wound thoroughly, flushing it again with warmed wine. He gently debrided the dead tissue, a painful process that Telephus bore with royal fortitude and a few hissed curses. Then Machaon packed the spear filings paste deep into the wound's cavity and smeared it generously over the surface. The coppery scent mingled with that of fermenting wine and raw flesh. For a few moments, nothing happened. The onlookers held their breath. Telephus lay back, exhausted, a sheen of sweat on his brow. Then, gradually, a change. The angry redness around the wound began to recede. The bleeding, which had been oozing persistently, slowed to nearly nothing. Telephus's pained gasps eased into steady breaths. "By the gods, the burning has dulled," the king whispered in wonder. To Machaon's trained eye, the improvement was apparent. The wound visibly looked cleaner, less inflamed, as though the infection's advance had been halted at the source. In truth, the copper was killing the unseen agents of corruption, tormenting the flesh, though none present could name such invisible demons. To them it appeared as divine favor or the logic of oracle fulfilled. "It's working," Odysseus murmured, astonished despite himself. A broad smile broke across Achilles' face. Agamemnon exhaled in relief and gave Machaon an approving clap on the back. Telephus gingerly propped himself up on his elbows, color returning to his cheeks. His voice, though hoarse, was warm. "Achilles, you have undone what you did. And Machaon, son of Asclepius, your name shall be blessed in Mysia all my days." Over the next hours, Machaon remained by Telephus's side, reapplying the copper paste twice and monitoring the king's condition. By sunset, Telephus was able to stand with assistance and hobble a few steps, marveling that the searing pain had reduced to a dull ache. The infection's fever broke. It felt nothing short of miraculous. Telephus, being a reasonable man beneath his warrior's pride, openly credited the Greek healer. In a formal ceremony the next morning, the convalescent king offered rich gifts, horses, gold, and fine robes, to Machaon, who accepted them politely on behalf of the whole Greek force. More importantly, Telephus offered guidance. "I know these coasts and the route to Troy," he declared before the court. Leaning on a cane, he traced a map on a clay tablet for the Greek navigators, pointing out how to avoid the treacherous currents that had led them astray. "With this, you shall not mistake Mysia for Troy again, and when you reach Troy, may Apollo guide your spears true, and your healer's hands steady," he added with a respectful nod to Machaon. During this exchange, Telephus's son Eurypylus hovered at the edge of the hall, pale but recovering from his own wounds. The young man looked at Machaon with a mixture of gratitude and something else, a troubled, searching expression. Perhaps it was the confusion of owing his life to an enemy. Machaon merely gave him a gentle smile and inclined his head, as one might reassure a patient that all is well. Eurypylus lowered his eyes, saying nothing. None could suspect that within the boy's heart, seeds of conflicting loyalty and future sorrow were quietly germinating. For now, all was reconciled. The Greeks departed Mysia as friends rather than invaders, thanks to the healer who turned strife into healing. Back aboard his ship after the farewell banquet, Machaon took a moment to marvel at the turn of events. He had interpreted an oracle, with Odysseus's help true, used an ancient remedy in a novel way, and saved not just Telephus's life, but perhaps the entire expedition from languishing in confusion. The scientific part of his mind catalogued the observation. The filings of bronze, essentially copper, had a potent effect on infection. He filed that knowledge away for future patients. The humane part of him felt only relief that a man in agony was restored to life and family. And a pragmatic part realized this deed greatly elevated his standing among the Greeks. No longer was he merely the quiet surgeon in the background. He had stepped into the light of heroics, if only briefly, and shown that wisdom and mercy could steer the course of war as surely as valor. As if to underscore that, Agamemnon himself came to Machaon on deck that evening, cup of wine in hand. "Machaon, I owe you thanks. We all do," the High King said gruffly. "Without Telephus's aid, we might still wander the seas, or face Poseidon's wrath for an ill-timed voyage. You've saved time, lives, and honor." Machaon bowed his head humbly. "I merely did what the gods willed, my lord, and what my father taught me." Agamemnon nodded. In an unusual show of camaraderie, he raised his wine cup in toast, "To Asclepius's son, healer of kings." They drank. Machaon felt heat rise to his cheeks at such high praise, but he resolved not to let it swell his ego. There remained so much yet to do, so many yet to save. With clear directions at last, the Greek fleet readied itself to depart for Troy in earnest. But fate, as it often did, had one more diversion in store for Machaon before he reached the shores of Ilion, a diversion that would change his life in a far more personal way than any battle or cure yet accomplished.